on camera if they're open to it. But again, just full disclosure, it is recorded. Um, Great turnout last week, similar turnout this week. Looking forward to the session with my friend Lukey. I'm going to give him the ability to take over and tell us a bit about himself. I want to do some introductions as well, and then we're going to get deep into this. So, Lukey, over to you, and then I'll introduce myself right after.
Sure. So my name is Luki. There's Danu Karyanto. Most people are curious about the last name. So I'm Indonesian, is where I'm from. But it's a made up last name, is what I tell people. My dad made it up. It actually means resourceful worker in Indonesian. So if you're ever there and need one, well, ask for a Danu Karyanto. I was born there, but I grew up in the Toronto area. I did a degree in computer science because my dad was at IBM. Everybody was into tech, and Silicon Valley was thriving. And I wanted to do computer games. Is essentially what I wanted to start coding. But when I graduated, the dot-com bubble had burst. So circa 2001, 2002, 9/11 just happened. SARS was on its way, and yeah, the dot-com was melted. The bubble was melting at that time. It burst significantly, and it was hard for folks to get a job. Lucky I had a friend whose brother helped me get an interview, and I got the role. As even more luck would have it, that company was Deloitte. I thought I was joining an accounting firm, but I ended up on the consulting side, and I spent over 12 years there. I started as a coder, as a developer, and then moved into testing, change management training, project management advisory, and then took roles as one of the talent leaders. And I used to run their undergrad campus recruiting program. And yeah, 12 years later, I decided to leave that and become a career coach and start my entrepreneurial journey. And I founded Focus Inspired. And now I like to say that I found my purpose, helping others find theirs, because a lot of us had to become like or had the expectations to become a doctor, lawyer, accountant, engineer. The fun fact is I was named Luke or Lukey because Saint Luke is the patron saint of doctors. So I was expected to be a doctor, but I failed miserably on that side. So I help a lot of newcomers, international students, immigrants, and children of immigrants as well to help them find their purpose. And I share my swag, the stuff I wish I knew earlier, and really focus on elevating soft skills, teaching things like emotional intelligence, effective communication, even learning to learn, like those types of things. And sometimes the job search as well, because those are skills that often aren't top of mind when it comes to schooling. So that's a little bit about me, and happy to answer any more questions on that. And Kunal, if you want to uh, continue, and I'll take it back over later.
Yeah, absolutely. Very quickly, I think most of you know me by now. Founder of Getting Ahead professionally, 20 plus years in banking, consulting, last 5 years out of my own. So guys, like you name the big bank, I've done it apart from maybe Scotia, Deloitte for 3 years, internal consulting at RBC, AVP running transformation at CIBC. Last 5 years out of my own. Had the fortune of working with a few CEOs now independently, one in the insurance space, most recently doing strategy and execution on that side. At the same time, working with the board and president of a very large college in the Ontario area, or in Ontario in the Toronto area, doing transformation as their interim CTO or chief transformation officer. Side of that, similar to Lukey, found a passion for helping others and built Getting Ahead to do that, continuing to grow and scale the partner or the platform with some partnerships, more and more to be announced. And that's largely how I've met all of you. Lukey and I both share a passion for sharing our experience and helping others and bringing people together to help them get where they want to go. That's it about me. I will turn to each of you. Let's start with each of you. If you can, at least while you're doing an introduction, please come on camera, introduce yourself to the rest of the attendees. We're going to be doing some virtual workshopping, so it's good for everybody to know each other. Cesar, over to you, my friend. Welcome back. I'd love to introduce you to the team.
Hi everyone, my name is Cesar. I am from Peru. I came to Canada a year ago. I just finished a program at your university for 1 year, and now I am looking for new opportunities. My background is in marketing, to be specific in digital marketing. I consider as a person who loves the sales and the way that we can help to the company to increase the revenue, to motivate the sales team, that the digital part is so important for the company, and how can and the way that we can improve the brand awareness, how we can improve the knowledge about the brand for the customers, potential customers. And now I am participating for different working events to try to connect with more people, to try to know more about the Canadian market, and that's it. That's for me.
Great to have you here. Vasuki, over to you. An introduction to the team, please.
Hello everyone, good evening. My name is Vasuki and I came to Canada in the year 2022 April. I'm doing my master's in software engineering at University of Regina. And yeah, I have a experience back there in India for a healthcare company for 2 years in system integration testing. And I'm here to look out for a good to land in a good jobs in a back-end developing side. And uh, the main thing is I want to connect to the people and interact with people and make a good connection. That's what Prakar has previously mentioned, that make connections, grow your connections. So that's what I'm here to just interact with the people and what are their interests and learn about it.
Excellent. Welcome. Remy Lakeland, welcome back. Good to see you again. If you can jump on screen and introduce yourself to the team, it would be fantastic. There she is. Hello. Good to see you again. You're on mute.
Oh, so sorry about that. Okay, can you hear me now?
We can. Welcome back.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. It's so good to be here. Thank you, Kunal, for this great session. Okay, so background, my background, I'm okay, I'm Remileko Oni. I have 10 years experience in banking. My background has been credit analysis, financial analysis, and at some point I was an executive support to one of the executive directors, and right now I want to transition into the human resources role. So my dream job would be to be a human resource professional. So for this session, I look forward to see how I can optimize my resume, put myself out there as the go-to person when they are looking for human resource professional. Thank you.
Great to have you here. A couple more. Anand, if you could jump on screen, my friend, and introduce yourself to the team, it'd be fantastic.
Thanks, Kunal. So, hi everyone. I am Anand Bhanu, and I arrived here in Canada in 2022 for my MBA at Schulich, Yorkview. I have experience of software development back in India. I graduated in computer science from VTU. After coming to Canada, I had like opportunity to choose between different career paths, and strategy interested me because otherwise as well my like preferences match. And during my stint at Schulich, I worked with different organizations which was part of our different projects, and I worked in different roles, and one of those was like business development director at WISEC. So that gave me a lot of opportunity to interact with local businesses and people here. And to be honest, that helped me understand the Canadian market. At the same time, I'm also done with my studies and I'm looking for a job right now. And so far, so good. After meeting Kunal, it has been really helpful. I feel that I have got some direction. So thank you for that. and looking forward to interact with you all more. Thank you.
It's great to have all of you here again. Luki and I are just honestly two people who want to help others, and this is kind of the motive of all of it. It's kind of the motive of his business. It's the motive of why I started getting ahead. Appreciate you guys being here. Take advantage of this stuff. The next two sessions are going to be really interesting. You have somebody very experienced in terms of Luki going down the path of building a foundation for your search. Going to do a session on networking, on resumes, on how to use LinkedIn. If you can attend these sessions, please do. We will start posting them on our YouTube channel as well, probably a week or so after the recording or the date. The YouTube's channel, for those of you who don't know, if you go to the bottom of the Getting Ahead homepage, there's links to all of our social media there, and you can find the YouTube channel there as well. I warn you now, if you go watch any videos with me in it, watch them before you go to sleep. I will guarantee to put you to sleep. I was never meant to be a social media star. Prakar, you're laughing, but if you suffer from insomnia, I am the solution. That said, Luki, over to you.
Sounds good. So hopefully I'll be able to keep you awake throughout this time, especially given that it's dinner time. So as Kunal mentioned, this is a first of a 4-part series. So we're going to lay down the foundations, and a lot of this you probably know, but I'll hopefully share it in a particular way where it resonates a little bit differently and maybe readjust kind of your perspective on things. Next week, we'll do a deep dive on LinkedIn and networking. So that's where I think a lot of you will take a lot of value. Then we'll get into interviews, right? So that one, you need to be able to tell me about yourself and do it in a good way, because oftentimes people will have this sense of, I'm a 7, 8 out of 10. But oftentimes when I provide the feedback, they often are a 5 or 6. So you don't want to be overconfident in that, because compared to yourself or other people, it might be good. But after you've interviewed hundreds, if not thousands of people, there's room for improvement for a lot of folks. And then we'll get into resumes. And it's purposely set up in this way because it's almost in the order of importance, right? So for those of you, you already keyed on networking is probably the best way for you to land an opportunity. Interviews, you eventually need to do one at some point in time. And resumes are just happen to be the method for you to land some of those things. But we'll get into more of those deep dives later on. But we'll cover a whole bunch of different things. Like we'll start a little bit with myths and misconceptions. So make this as interactive as possible. So if you want to type in the chat or raise your hand and ask questions, feel free to let me know in terms of like, yeah, I've heard this or that. And I usually share what I call my first principles approach, where it's why is it a certain way, right? Because all the job search out there, all the job search advice out there is completely correct and absolutely wrong at the same time, right? Because it always depends on context, right? So there's no one size fits all for any of it, but I'll share with you what's kind of like the 80%, 90% of what most people will drive. And then I'll share a little bit about like when you shouldn't do it, right? So we'll get into all of these different topics. I'll share a little bit of benchmarking and get you underway with the foundations. And we'll deeper dive in the other sections in future sessions. And the promise to you is by following and understanding these foundations, you will know exactly what you need to do to land a job. And by the end, we'll create a plan, and you follow the plan and you will be successful. Sound good to everybody? All right, good head nods, right? So myths and misconceptions. So these are common ones, and these are the top 3 that I put in, but you might have your own. So if you have any that you've heard, feel free to type it in and just I'll hopefully share any or correct any doubts that you might have, right? You need to send hundreds of resumes to get a job, right? How many resumes have you sent, right? Has anybody sent hundreds of resumes? No, so there's a couple people guilty as charged, right? And there is this notion where you need 100, 200 more resumes to do that. And that's the premise of like quantity versus quality. So if all you're going for is quantity, then of course you need a lot of them, right? But I would rather you have 20 well-crafted resumes with networking and adding value and things like that, versus 200 generic ones that get sent out, right? And oftentimes there's a method to that. And when we get to the resume one, I'll show you exactly how to do that. That will make you like 3 times, 10 times more likely to pass the ATS scanners and get selected and all that sort of stuff. I had many folks where one person I spoke to last week, he said like I was not getting a single interview. And then I followed up with him in like 2 weeks after, and he's like, I have 3 interviews next week. So there, it does work, and it's just a matter of putting in the work. So you only need to send hundreds if the quality of your resumes are low, right? And there are tools like the applicant tracking scanner systems that will match it with 72% and stuff. Those are okay, but they're not the be all and end all of stuff. So you have to really understand the method behind it in order to make sure that those are correct, right? Has anybody heard that the applicant system tracking systems are blocking your resume from being seen by a human? Has anybody seen that? And the answer is maybe or maybe not, right? Most companies, they don't trust the applicant tracking systems yet, right? So there is sometimes a cutoff, usually the question. So when I was at Deloitte, we would have a couple of questions, which would be like, what is your GPA? And are you eligible to work in Canada? And that sort of thing, right? And some of those questions would put you in a different pile, right? So for us, the GPA was an indicator of your success, right? So anybody below kind of a 3-point something would be at risk, right? So, and for us, because we got thousands every term, right? We would basically adjust the GPA score that, so we would only have about 200, 100 and something to review, right? So some years it was a 3.2, some years it was a 3.5, some years it was, well, I think 3.2 was ever the lowest, and I think it went up to 3.7 one year, right? And this is off a 4-point scale, because I know some of you college folks, you have a 4.5-point scale or a 5-point scale, which starts screwing things up. And so they've changed that method, because I know that some colleges game the system, because having a 3.9 on a 4.5 scale is a lot different. But the point is that oftentimes, yes, there might be some aspects of it that would be blocking you, but chances are a human is actually looking at it. The challenge is a human might only spend 6 seconds, 10 seconds, 25 seconds on this thing. So if you're not hitting the right points at the right time, then you're going to go to the no pile, right? And common perception is you need Canadian experience, right? Who's heard that before? Yeah, everybody. And I know plenty of folks who get hired without Canadian experience. I find that Canadian experience is a very polite way for Canadians to say, I don't believe that you can do the role, is essentially it, right? Because on your experience, you have 2, 3, 5, 10 years of experience. You can do the role, but I may not believe it because there's some cultural pieces, or maybe you weren't able to articulate yourself or whatever. So they put this in this catch-all bucket of you don't have Canadian experience, so I don't want to go too far into it. And kind of put you aside. Now there's legislation this year where you can't have that as a requirement on a job description, but that doesn't preclude an employer from making a decision from that regard, right? So it is a reality of things, but there are definitely ways of getting around that, right? And oftentimes it's doing things to stand out, right? Does anybody have any other myths or misconceptions that they've heard of and they want to kind of like confirm or deny or talk about? Has anybody heard anything that like, yeah, I hear that something, and I'll try to give you my honest answer from that.
I think these are 3 that in the 14, 15 months I've been actively speaking on campus and speaking to others, Luki, these are 3 that come up the most frequently.
Right. Yeah, so if you have any, feel free to type it in the chat and I'll get to it. I know I'm putting you on the spot, but for me, the fundamentals, the job search is actually very simple, right? In order to get a job, you need an offer. To get an offer, you need to go through interviews. To get interviews, you need to apply or network. Simple. That's it. That's all you need to do, right? And behind all that is your experience, right? You have to articulate your experience in that vein, right? Now, the challenge is simple doesn't mean easy, right? Because as I mentioned before, there are different notions of what a good cover letter, resume, how to network, how to answer interview questions, all that sort of stuff. There's no universals, which makes it a little bit tricky on that side, right? And my view is because you have the 2 paths, the application path or the networking path, if your goal is to get an interview, right? And if you can think of a networking, having a coffee chat, virtual chat with someone, That's actually just an informal interview. Why wouldn't you start there? That's the most logical path. But for a lot of folks, because the traditional method was to go through applications, then that's why that one is so highly regarded. I would love for folks to benchmark themselves. So I'm going to paste in the chat a quick form. And all that is a few questions where it's going to ask you to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 on your resume writing skills, your LinkedIn, interviewing, and networking, right? And there's no wrong answers. There's zero judgment here. The goal is for me to understand so that I can help you a little bit, right? And showcase a little bit of, okay, if you are a 7 out of 10, this is what you need to do. If you're a 6 out of 10, this is what you need to do, right? So your resume writing skill, and I ask a question of, why didn't you give yourself higher or lower? So just text is like, well, I think it has a pretty good format, but the content needs work, or vice versa. LinkedIn, right? And if you want to go back to this sheet, I have a bunch of short videos that can help you. I don't necessarily need you to watch it right now, but basically 4 sections, one for resumes, LinkedIn, interviews, and networking, right? So if folks can take a minute to fill that in, that would be much appreciated. So as you're doing that, I'm going to move forward with my approach to career success and job searching in general. So for me, when you're looking at your career, when you're looking for a job, I like to start with the what, the why, and then the how, right? So what do you want, right? A lot of folks have all these different roles because they might have be switching into a career in cybersecurity, but have a background in IT and also have experience in education. And they try to be everything to everyone. And there's an expression, if you're everything to everyone, you're nothing to no one, right? And for those that get to know me, I love quotes. And there's a expression, chase 1 rabbit, catch 1, chase 2 rabbits, catch none, right? So some of you are catching 2, 3, 4, 5 rabbits. And no wonder you're not getting any results, because you don't know exactly what you want. And that doesn't mean you commit and that's the only thing that you can do. But if you focus your attention, then it gets a little bit better. And then the second part is the why. And when you have that true why of, I'm doing it because I love it, I'm passionate about it, and I can showcase my skill and desire for it, versus I'm doing it because it's hot and I think I can land a job. Those are 2 very different motivations and intentions, and will carry through during the job search process. So if you can find that honest and authentic why of why you're going after this job, why you're entering this industry, then that will really help people want to hire you. And then the how, well, we'll get to a bunch of that right now. So what I want folks to do is to start on the job search, right? So get clear on what you want. And so these are a whole bunch of job boards, and I think all of you are subscribed. And what I'd love all of you to do is to find a job that you want. Does everybody have like an ideal job, or something that if I could, I would love to have this job? Does everybody have one of those? Or maybe it's a job that you recently applied for that you could use. Does everybody have one? And if you can type in the chat yes, or raise your hand or something, just to let me know that you're there. Has everybody used all of these job boards in order to find some of those? Okay, I see some head nods, but yeah, so there you go. Now we have some people interacting in the chat, so I appreciate that. But the goal is to be really clear on what you want, right? And what you'll want to do with every single job. So for those of you who say no, that you don't have, this is where you want to get clear. Go find one that you want to say, you know what, I could actually do this job. I actually meet 80%, 90%, 100% of the criteria, all the responsibilities, the qualifications, and everything that's listed here. And if you can showcase that, then you're in good shape, right? If you're just hoping and praying that you'll be able to articulate the stuff that you can do, then that's not going to work very well in the long run for the job search, right? So go find a job that you want. And basically what you want to do is take a look at the responsibilities, right? A lot of people, what they do is they focus only on the qualifications. And that's usually like a certain number of years of work experience, a university degree, and some technical skills, experience in, I don't know, particular technology or communication, time management, teamwork, and all that sort of stuff, right? But really, if you're on the recruiting side, what they'd love to see is your ability to do what they're asking you to do, right? So you go to the responsibilities, the section, and that is the stuff that you're going to be doing. So the interview questions that they're going to ask, they're going to be those ones. The things that they want to see on your resume, that's what we want to have there. What we want to see on your LinkedIn, those particular bullets and stuff of that, right? So what you want to do is find that job that you want and go bullet by bullet on those responsibilities. Do I have that? And if the answer is no, well, are you giving yourself enough credit? Because some people, you've done it before, but maybe in a different context, maybe not exactly with that technology or that business process, but something similar, right? And then what you want to do is understand how can you share that in the best possible way on your resume, right? Because you might have done it multiple times, and the more recent the experience, the better. And the more I guess the bigger name brand, that sort of thing will be better as well. And you'll have to be able to articulate that on your resume, on your interview responses, and when networking and connecting with folks, right? So do you have that experience? And if not, how can you get it? Right. And for some of you, you have that experience, but just not the Canadian version, right? So if you actually take some time to, let's say, volunteer or do some freelance projects or do a personal project or something that's local, then that will often be a differentiator for you, right? And that bullet at the bottom in blue is probably the key one, right? To stand out, you need to do something that stands out, right? Because a lot of you are following the same playbook that everybody else is doing, right? You're applying to a whole bunch of roles, you're networking with a whole bunch of people, but all you're doing is connecting with them and asking them if they have any opportunities or roles and things like that. But how many of them are you actually helping and adding value to, right? Obviously, the folks here that are helping out with getting ahead know the value of it because they have differentiated themselves. They're latching themselves off to a cause that is important to them, and that by effect, it helps them to stand out, right? So what is it that you've done that stands out? Can you actually answer the question? And if you can, then type it in the chat and share a little bit of what you've done in order to stand out. And we can share a little bit about how to cultivate that, right? So just be mindful of that, because a lot of folks just automatically assume that I have a degree, I have an experience, so therefore I will have jobs. It's like, well, yes, you and the hundreds of other newcomers, international students, and domestic folks that are also competing for the same jobs, right? So again, it's a very competitive, it's a very tight market right now. So you need to be able to stand out, and you need to do something to stand out in order for you to write about it on your resume, talk about it in your interview responses, or even share when you're networking with someone, right?
I think this is such a critical point, guys. Like, there's a few things that Luki said that really resonate with me. One, this is a tough job market, right? A, economic cycle. B, Canada in general is very small, right? And the economy here is small. The number of job opportunities are very small, but the workforce is incredibly well educated. Internationally, domestically, it has an abundance of experience. So this piece about standing out, all of you, or so all of us, are unique individuals in some way. We have all done something that, whether it's a volunteer, whether it's something in a school club, whether it's something in our careers that is unique and can be showcased. The other point that I want to call out that Luki mentioned is networking. And I know we're going to do a session on this in particular. Networking for me is a two-way street, and it's something that I will talk about a lot when we get into that session. It is give and take, not just take, right? And the more you give, the more you will get back. But to this point, think about yourselves as an individual and share that. I touched on this during last week's webinar. Cesar, I believe you were with us, Remy Luke, and I know you were as well. You need to be an individual, and you need to share that with people that, hey, here's who I am, here's what I'm about, here's what I've done, and here's what I can do for you to help. And those messages need to come across clearly, succinctly, as Luki talked about with the experience section. But you are unique. Showcase it.
Indeed, yeah. So we'll dig deep into that in other sessions, but I want to set a little bit of more foundations in terms of expectations for the job search, right? So for most folks, you might not be happy to hear it, but the typical job search takes about 1 to 6 months, right? And that is kind of the reality of things. And that's actually in a strong or a decent market, right? Now, people are saying kind of 3 to 9 months, 3 to 12, and other people have been job searching for much, much longer, right? But the good thing is people hire for 3 things, right? They hire based on fit, skills, and experience, right? And what fit means is, do I like you? 2 is, do I believe you can do the work? And 3 is experience, right? So this whole notion of Canadian experience is that last one, right? Have you done the work before, right? You haven't done the work before in Canada, but you might have done it in your home country, wherever that is. But usually where this Canadian experience catch-all falls in is that middle part. They don't necessarily believe that you can do the job, right? And it's a competitive cycle. So it might be that they believe you can do the job, but in comparison to the other 12 candidates that are also interviewing, they don't believe that you can do it the best, right? And then at the end of the day, if it's in that order. So if I like you and I believe you can do the job, I don't actually care if you have the experience or not. I will hire you, right? But the opposite is not true. If you have the experience, but I don't believe you can do the job, or I don't really like you, I won't hire you, right? Because I might not want to have lunch with you on a regular basis if you don't have that kind of personality or something that's in you that I want to take a bet on, right? So that's in the back of your head, something that you want to consider. And the whole notion of like networking is really that first bit, right? With something called propinquity, which is basically repeated exposure to someone. So you might have been in a place where, like in a class, you see that person more and more. You hang out in the gym, you meet every time, and just by the fact that you see them on a regular basis, you start liking them more. Right? And that's just human nature, right? So the more that you put yourself in front of someone, that you like someone's post, that you volunteer with them or whatever, even just by that proximity, they're going to like you more. And if I like you more, I'm going to want to hire you, right? So just keep that as a thought in the back of your head. A couple of expectations. So folks often wonder, okay, I've applied to so many, like, is my application any good? Is my interview skills any good? Is whatever up to par, right? So my typical benchmark is you should get 1 interview for every 20 applications, right? So about 5% of everything that you submitted, you should get an interview, right? In this market, I'm hearing kind of 30, 40 even is the upper bound. And with that, that's assuming that your resume is, let's say, an 8 or 9 out of 10. So if you put it through one of those resume scanners, if it's like an 8 or 9, 80, 90%, then you submit 20 of them, you should land an interview, right? If you're submitting a 60% or 50%, this is where the 200 applications have to come through, right? Because it's just such a competitive market, right? So if you are not hitting that range, there is something wrong with your resume, right? A lot of folks will go to employment agencies and career centers and things like that. And a lot of those folks are very nice and very well-meaning people, but most of them have never hired anybody, right? So if you want your resume reviewed by someone, you need to have it reviewed by someone who has hired someone, right? And they can actually tell you, this is what would be picked out, this would not be. So that's oftentimes where the challenge is with a lot of folks. Newcomers, they'll go to employment agencies, they'll go to their career centers, and they'll get some good feedback. And sometimes these folks, they're nice, and they're just too nice. They say, oh yeah, it's pretty good, right? Just keep doing it, right? Because they don't really know that what they think is an 8 out of 10 is really a 5, is really a 6, or whatever. So you need to make sure that whatever you have is reviewed by like someone who's experienced, right? So let's assume that you do land one of these coveted interviews, right? It's a competitive process. You can't guarantee that with that 1 interview, you will land a job, right? So usually about 20%, 1 in 5 is the estimate where you will land a job. And again, this is if you are operating at an 8 or 9 out of 10, right? Some of you will go and tell me like, oh yeah, I think I did a pretty good job. I think I got a 7 out of 10, right? That's my performance. But I hate to break it to you, but in this market, people are not hiring 7s, right? They're hiring 8s or 9s just because there's an ample supply. It's super competitive that if your answer is a 7 or below, I like to call that 4th place at the Olympics, which is like, ooh, a little bit more and you could get a medal, right? But that 7 out of 10 is not going to cut it, right? Now, in a different market where there's less supply, or if you're in a super niche area, then this doesn't apply, right? Because there's very few people who can actually do what you can do. But I heard a bunch of devs, a bunch of marketers here. There's plenty of supply out there. So how you differentiate yourself is saying things in the right way in order to make sure they believe that you can do the role and that they like you, right? So those are the 2 key things that you want to do. And obviously that you want to wrap your experience around those 2, right? On the networking side, right? So some folks have had success with networking, some folks haven't. I have what I call the 10-6-3-1 rule, which is if you connect with 10 people, 6 will ignore you, 3 will say no, and 1 will change your life, right? And maybe not in that exact proportion. Sometimes it's a 99 and 1, right? But oftentimes there is that one person that is super helpful. They see themselves in you. It's like, oh yeah, that was my experience. That was exactly what happened when I landed or came to Canada or when I graduated or whatever else. And they'll refer you and they'll help you out. I like to call those the unicorns, right? But sometimes it's the 12th person that you connect to that becomes the unicorn, not necessarily the 100th person that you connect to. So just be mindful of that, right? That not 100% of folks will respond, right? And if you're getting above 10%, you're actually doing pretty good. And what I recommend for folks is if you have an hour to job search, spending some of it on interview practice, so about 10 minutes, some of it on networking, about 10 minutes, and the 30 minutes, the bulk of it applying, because that's just the thing that takes the longest. And then 10 minutes on your portfolio or updating your LinkedIn, depending on which ones need work first. And then 5 minutes on reflecting, right? And I know the math doesn't quite work on that, but it's one where you want to add that time for reflecting at the end, just in order to improve each time that you do it, right? And obviously, if you have a full workday, if you're a full-time job seeker, then you extend that out and times it by 8 or however many hours you plan on working for the day. So any questions or that? Has that been your experience, or what are your thoughts in terms of like those numbers that I'm putting out as a benchmark? People agree, people disagree, thoughts? I see some head nods, so hopefully they're agreeing, or they're at least in premise, they understand where they may or may not be going wrong. So that's what you can use to help debug or troubleshoot your list. So when we get into job search plan, right, the foundations are just the things that we talked about, right? And one of the key elements that you need to have and that encompasses all of it is this word here, time. You got to make the time, right? And be consistent and diligent about your time. Because there are some folks where they'll just apply when they have time. They'll network when they have time. They'll interview when they have time. But if you consistently do that, then you will land a job, right? So what is your plan to improve your interview skills, right? So if your interview skills are a 4 out of 10, how will you get to a 5, to a 6, to a 7, 8, 9, 10? If your resume is a 4 out of 5, 4 out of 10, how do you get it to an 8? If your experience is low, how do you get that, right? If all you're doing is doing the same thing over and over again and not improving, then that's the challenge, right? It's not that you're sending resumes out or practicing interviews and getting better each time. You're doing the same thing over and over and over again. That's usually where the big miss is for a lot of folks, right? So I highly encourage you to allocate the time to improve on that as well. So Kunal, you want to mention something?
I'm going to mention 2 things, folks. I've heard this and learned this and agree with it. Finding a job is almost a full-time job in itself. Mm-hmm. Right. And it takes a very focused effort of starting with reflection in these areas, building those core foundations, and then putting the effort into the search. Right. And I know that's hard to do because we all have other things to do, whether part-time jobs, whether children, whether household responsibilities, whatever it may be. But this takes focused time and effort. The other thing I would add to this list, and I know it's something that I've suggested to a few of you now who have reached out to me individually asking for time, I'm happy to meet with you and give you that time. But what I want to see first is your plan. Luki talked about this early on, hundreds of resumes. For many of you, I worry that's what you're doing. Okay, you're randomly applying to things online, hundreds of resumes, etc. What I want to see is what industries, what are those top 20, 30 employers you want to focus on? What are the teams and areas in those employers? Let's sit down with that list. Let's start to then focus the networking there, right? You have to do the diligence, and that's almost part of the planning. It's project planning. You build your plan, you build your Gantt chart and your activities and your sequences. This is the foundation. As part of this, the plan on where you want to look and where you want to focus this time and energy is critical for me.
Yep, definitely sage advice and words of wisdom in there. So as we kind of move on, when we talk about time, like how are you allocating your time? So I have a concept which I use called the model week, right? So are you actually spending time doing what you want to be doing, right? So basically it's a Google Sheet, right? Is essentially what it is. And it has a calendar type of format, right? Sunday to Saturday or what have you. And what you can do is you can set the time. So if you wake up at 7, if you wake up at 6, or if you wake up a little bit later, then this will just change appropriately. And what you want to do is allocate your job search time. So let's say you have a full-time job, right? You want to put things like sleep. Sleep is very important for those that haven't realized. There's research out there that if you're getting like 1 less hour of sleep, so let's say you normally get 8 and you're doing 7, or you normally get 7 and you get 6, it's the equivalent of being mildly intoxicated, right? So many of you are actually going around drunk, right? And you might notice like the fogginess or the haziness in your brain. You're not operating at 100%. You're operating at 70%, right? So instead of spending 8 hours job searching, you're really only spending 5 or 6, right? Because it's not as productive, not as effective, right? So sleep is super important. You got to do your morning routines. You might have time to recover and stuff, but you allocate what you can to the job search, right? So this is someone who's taking it easy on their job search, right? Only allocating 3 hours a day, but they're allocating 3 hours a day. And the way they split it is time for interviews, time for networking, time for applications, and portfolio. Again, always those 4 things is what you need to do, right? And they're taking time for family and self-care and all that. Now, if you are full-time job searching, then you'd break it up even more, where you'd spend like the first hour basically in doing interview practice, then networking for a good chunk of it, then applications in the afternoon, right? And notice that there are all these breaks that are in between, because the job search is a marathon, not a sprint, right? So you need to be able to take the breaks, like go grab that water and pour it on your face, and then next and next and next and next. So I encourage all of you to do that, right? And within each of them, so for every, for a job search day, where if you spend an 8-hour a day, my benchmark is that when you're at your peak period, you should be able to submit 8 applications, practice 8 interview questions, and network with 8 people, both on the new and the reconnect, right? So, and the reason 8, you should be able to do roughly 1 an hour, and a work day is roughly 8 hours, right? Now, at some point, you won't have 8 applications come in, right? There'll be an inundation at the beginning, but at some point, every day, there might only be 3 jobs, 5 jobs, 2 jobs, 1 job, right? Depending on how niche your area is. And when you're at that state, then the delta goes into networking, right? So if you only have 3 jobs today, then the other 5, you connect with 12 people instead of 8, right? And interviews, at some point, you'll get pretty good. And instead of practicing 8 interview questions, you might practice only 5, and the other 3 go to networking, right? So this is where we over-index on networking once the fundamentals are taken care of, right? So I encourage you all to create a model week and see how well you did. Like, did I actually meet my quota? Did I actually spend time on what I did? Because a lot of you will say you don't have time, but then you show me your TikTok feed, your YouTube history, and I realized where all that time went, right? So that's just something for you to consider on that side. right? I lost my screen. Where'd it go? Oh, it's over here. All right, so invest the time. And essentially what I say is the job search is really just math or drama, right? So what is math? Math is applying, practicing interview questions, networking, and working on your portfolio. That's math. You do those 4 things, you will land a job, right? Everything else is drama. Oh, what if they don't accept? Oh, what if I do this? Oh, what if that person doesn't reach out? What if they don't whatever, right? All that is drama. It's a time wasted for you being in your head and making up stories instead of actually doing the work. Because during that time, during that extra half hour, whole half a day that you're doing that, you didn't apply. You didn't practice interviews. You didn't network. You didn't update your portfolio, right? So something for you to consider. And within that time, be sure to add a little bit of reflection on what you're doing well and what you can do better, right? And the plan to improve as well.
Any of you sports fans here? Any of you basketball fans? Yes? No? Maybe so. For the sports fans, regardless of sport, Michael Jordan, everybody knows the name, arguably one, the greatest basketball player of all time. There's a quote that always floats around the internet that he said that, look, I took X thousands of shots in my career, and on those shots I failed 90% of the time, but it was the 10% that were successful that led me to the championships and to the things, right? So this math side of this is really critical. One, it's about optimizing your chance for those shots to succeed and then taking those shots.
Yep, for sure. So definitely take the shots and do it with the highest probability possible, right? So when we get into the foundations, I start with interviews mainly because when you get good at articulating your fit, your ability to do the work, and your experience, then it makes you better at networking. It actually makes you better at writing your resume, right? Because now you have these experiences, because what you want to do is take what they're asking for on the job description and be able to articulate yourself, right? And even though the universe of questions are infinite, right? Your experiences are not. You really only have like 10, maybe 20 experiences that you actually want to talk about, right? The rest of them, yeah, I probably don't want to mention them, right? And from there, that last work experience, that last student group, that's whatever, that's your teamwork experience. It's also your time management experience. It's also your problem solving experience. It's also your whatever, right? But the way that you answer it, again, as an 8 or 9 out of 10, you need to practice that. Because if you get it on the spot, you might get it at a 6 or a 7, right? But that's not good enough. You need to get higher, right? So we talked about that, and you do that in the context of the role, right? And we'll go and do a deeper dive in next week week after for interviews. Oh no, that is next week. I think I actually mixed up the dates, and we might do networking next. So that should be corrected. But in 2 weeks, we'll talk about interviews. And there's 2 elements that you want to practice, right? One is delivery and one is content, right? Because some of you who are very articulate, very dynamic, very outgoing, you actually are lulled into a false sense of security because you speak really well. But meanwhile, your content is not relevant to the role. You're just saying words. You're saying it very well, but what you're saying doesn't show me that you can do the work, right? Doesn't make me like you anymore because it's just fluff, right? So getting down to like, does this actually say that I can do the work and makes me believe I can do that? That's something that we have to practice. And really, that's all interviews are. Practice, 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 right? And a lot of people think that being good at interviews mean that you're good at the job. That's not true, right? Unless your job is being like a talk show host guest, where all you're doing is answering questions, you know that there are people out there where they're amazing at the work, but couldn't ask you or answer a question right on the spot, right? Because the whole interview process is set up for a certain type of person, right? Because if you think about it, what happens in the working world, right? I give you something to do, you go away, problem solve, research, and whatever, you figure it out, Then after a while, you come back and share what it is, right? But how many workplaces do you have to do it right on the spot, on demand, on call, right? So for a certain type of person, that works really well. For most of us, I need time to think, right? Or I need to have practiced and prepared enough so that I don't have to think, it's instantaneous, right? So this is why practice is super important on the interview side, right? And there's an expression, you don't rise to the level of your expectations, you fall to the level of your training. Because all of you hope that this time you'll be a 9 out of 10, but if you practiced at a 4 out of 10, that's more likely what you'll get. Right? So it's something for you to consider in that, where that's why practicing is so important, right? And it's the most often neglected part of the whole job search process. People don't practice. They work so hard to get these interviews only to say, yep, I did okay. I got a 7 out of 10. Okay, that's not a great performance. Get yourself up to a higher level, right? Then the other aspect. So this one, I think, I screwed up the date, so I think this one is next week. But it's networking, right? Our approach, which we'll do a deep dive in, is to build meaningful connections, right? So a lot of you are just networking. You're making it very transactional. You're connecting with people on the hopes that they will refer you, on the hopes that they'll review your resume, on the hopes that they'll connect you to someone else, right? But as Kunal mentioned, it's often the expression, the more you give, the more you receive, right? Has anybody heard the expression, the more you receive, the more you receive? No, right? And people miss that first part, the more you give. So start with giving and then you can receive. Don't wait to receive first, because that, I mean, again, sometimes happens, but it's going to be a lower probability of that happening there. And oftentimes it starts with the right mindset, because some people who are of different cultures, right? Networking is not normal for them, right? It's something that they have to grow into. And if you grow into it with the approach that you can do it, then it can happen. My answer to every how to network question is to care, right? Because on the other end, there is a person, right? And if you care for that person, things go well, right? And then I have a whole approach where for building meaningful connections, you start at the back end and you make connections. There are two acronyms, Frank and Harry, which I'll share a little bit about what they are, but that's the people that you know and the people you should know, right? And then meaningful is, how many of you are comfortable in having a coffee chat or conversation with someone? Sort of, yeah. But how many of them are comfortable in adding value to someone during that conversation? And some people are like, well, I don't even know how to do that, right? And then what you need to do is build that over time, right? And if you can do all those things, in each one are their incremental skills. You practice this a little bit, and then you will get better. You practice this a little bit, and you will get better. And for those of you who are not naturally outgoing or great conversationalists or whatever, you can do that as well. And then using something like LinkedIn as a great tool in order to facilitate all that. So Kunal, I think you want to say something?
On the value piece, I touched on this last week. Value is not a function of how many years of work experience you have. Okay, all of us have value. Okay, as people who have done things that other people can relate to and will find useful. It doesn't necessarily need to be about being 20 years into your career, being known for something. Not it. It could be part of it, but think, and I go back a few slides here and think about, sharing your experience and the value. As you think about your resume, as you think about the experience, what is your value, right? Not just professionally, but as a person to somebody else. What can you offer that person in terms of help, in terms of guidance, in terms of support, right? I've said this many times as I've spoken, again, over the last 14, 15 months now. Your entire career will come down to one thing. For me, that one thing is your ability to build relationships with people. That's it. Keep going.
Sounds good. Yeah, so networking is going to be the foundational piece, and we could probably have a whole series on that alone. But we'll do a deeper dive a little bit later. And then the last element is your resume, right? So yes, that is the artifact, the tool that is used that needs to circulate in the process. But if you're doing the job search correctly, it is more an administrative document that needs to go through the system versus something that actually outlines. Because if you distill yourself down to 1 page, 2 pages, well, you're way more than that, right? You need to give yourself credit for that as well. And I mean, they're basic things on the resume. So for me, there's only 4 things that you need. 1, it needs to be clean and consistent, right? 2, it needs to be reverse engineered, meaning that it has to share what is listed on the job description. And ideally, you're upgrading your bullets to achievements, right? And showing how well you did the role, not just that you did the role. And then addressing any gaps, right? So if you're missing certain experience, if you're new grad or you haven't done this and that, then it has to clearly articulate that, right? And other than that, you don't need anything else. Everything else is just personal preference, right? Again, we'll deep dive that at the end of March. But yeah, there is a method to this. And if you follow these steps, and don't be lazy, because that's often what happens. Folks are lazy because it takes a while to do these things. But the good thing is, as you get better at it, as you practice interviews, as you network, you get faster and faster and faster, right? And most people don't wait to the point where they're good enough at writing resumes where they can do this quickly and efficiently, right? So what I want folks to do is basically build their plan, right? So on your job search, if you have an 8-hour workday, I kind of put that in the sample there. But when have you actually scheduled time for your job search? So who here is on the full-time job search? Is anybody full-time job searching? Okay, so you have lots of time, right? So you should be dedicating that. Now, the big challenge is it's hard to be doing this from 9 to 5, right, in a straight. So make sure you add those breaks, right? 5 minutes, go and do some jumping jacks or walk around the block or call a friend or like listen to music or something. And then after those 5 minutes are up, get back into it. And then next and the next and the next, because if you're doing it for day after day, week after week, month after month, it drains on you, right? So you need to stay motivated and accountable, right? So if you find those draining areas, well, how do you minimize them, right? And if you find some energizing areas, how do you maximize those and actually incorporate a little bit more of that? And what you want to consider is what will be your typical challenges. So for most folks that I deal with, it's I don't have enough time, right? That's usually when you have like a part-time job, you're also doing school, you also have your school clubs and all that sort of stuff, right? But it's not whether you find the time, it's whether you're making the time, right? Because you need to allocate the time. Don't just wait till you get home and you're super tired, then you do your job search. You want to allocate your time maybe first thing in the morning when you're fresh and ready to go. And then you've already invested in yourself so that you can make those commitments. Again, the math versus the drama, right? And some people, well, you just don't know how to like write your resume, make your interviews better or network. Well, that's why we'll do the deep dives into them. So make sure you come to the next few events and we'll dive deep. Again, we'll go back to fundamentals on like you've heard a whole bunch of different things, but these are going to be the basics that you need to know. And some of you are like, well, you know how to do that, but you don't know if your resume interviews or whatever are any good. And again, come to the sessions. We may put you on the hot seat. And if you tell me about yourself, I might give you an 8 out of 10. I might give you a 4 out of 10 as well, right? But the goal is, even if you're a 4 out of 10, now you'll know what to improve on and where to get better, right? And sometimes some of you, going back to that math versus drama, there's just some fear in there, like a fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of not being enough, or everybody's favorite, like imposter syndrome, right? If that's a challenge for you, then that's something that you need to deal with, right? And some people, instead of focusing on the challenges, if you focus on what you're excited about, right? That by applying to these jobs, by practicing in these interview questions, you're going to be able to start off your career. You're going to be able to showcase your skills. You're going to be able to work with a lot of amazing people and do some impactful work and learn and grow, right? And if that's your idea or your outcome, well, then applying to yet another role, probably doesn't sound so bad, right? So we covered a lot, all these different misconceptions. Hopefully folks completed their benchmark and you found a starter job and started identifying your gaps. Then you set your plan and your foundations. And I'd love for those that are here to share a little bit about your takeaways. Like, what is one thing different that you'll either take away or that you'll make sure to implement for the rest of your job search? So I'm going to ask Vasuki, what is the takeaway? And then I'll ask Prakar, and then Anand, and then Remalikun. So Vasuki, what was some memorable takeaway for you?
Actually, whatever you have presented, I am reflecting in my daily routine, which I'm going through, the timings and everything that you just presented. I mean, allocate time, take gaps in between. I've been following the, but the only thing is, while preparing for the interviews or any other aspects, I'm feeling a bit lazy. That laziness is coming. I need to overcome that. That's the only thing where I'm lagging, and that laziness is costing me a lot. That's the that's the thing. I mean, previously when I came early in my masters, I used to study for 3 to 4 hours at a stretch. But now sitting together for 1 hour is becoming a more burden on my head. That's the thing. That's the thing happening now.
100%. And
Yeah.
that's the drama, right? You're focused on. So focus on the math and you land a job. You get sucked into the drama and it just becomes challenging. So thanks so much, Vasuki. And like reach out and we can probably help you with that. Prakar, and then
Thank
Anand.
you.
Yeah, thanks, Luki. So yeah, pretty much what Vasuki basically said. It's the laziness. You know what you need to do, but sometimes, like of course, I've been through. Fortunately, I had my share of fulfilling the requirement to be disciplined. But yeah, two things which particularly stood out for me. Firstly, when you said simple does not necessarily mean easy. Like we know what to do, but we also have the realization at times that how much hard work or consistency is required for that. And that's when we decide to, I believe procrastination might as well be the biggest enemy sometimes. And you know that there's no one else to blame. So yeah, that's definitely there. So huge amount of discipline, I believe, is absolutely necessary. And I've also learned that. Another thing which you suggested and which I feel I personally going forward might have good scope for improvement in terms of is in the interviews, especially, or coffee chats or stuff like that, when you're basically speaking about yourself, putting forth your candidature, you might be a very good orator, you might communicate very well, and in your head you feel that you have done the best possible job, but sometimes it's all fluff, and the person on the other side of the table can see it and they can tell that. I have had to encounter that numerous times, basically, because every now and then I think if let's say I'm able to answer 7 or 8 things out of the 10 things they asked, I just want to not miss out on the last 2 things which I do not know about, and then I end up fluffing, I guess. And that's very apparent. So I guess it would be great if I can somehow learn how to cope with such situations when I know for a fact that there's something I do not know, or maybe 4 out of 5 software that I know, but the 5th one I don't.
Yeah.
How to perhaps suggest in a polite yet honest way that I'm not aware, but while eliminating the chance of me being ousted from being considered at all. So yeah.
So
I think you touched on I think you touched on a key word there, but I know we'll get into it in separate sessions. Honest, right? I will take somebody who's hired a lot of people. I will take the honest person who tells me, Kunal, I've got 4 of these things. The 5th is a work in progress. It's something that I need exposure to, and work with that person anytime over somebody who believes they're perfect, right? And I think most people are looking for honesty, right, versus a sales pitch, right? So just some quick feedback on that one, bud. The honesty in that would just go a long way with somebody like me if I was interviewing you, which by the way I have. So it's just a quick tip on that one. But sorry, Luki, back to you.
No, that's fine. Anand, what would you share?
Yeah. So first of all, Luki, thank you for such a detailed interview. I was really impressed, like how you went into the how you classified everything and you went into the details and you pointed out step by step how we can take action on every individual thing, and it resonated really well. Like it, I was able to like relate to where I was lacking. I could see the gaps that I needed to fill. And one thing that like there are a lot of takeaways from this, but one thing that stands out is like the a model week that you shared with us, like, and other resources as well that you shared that was really helpful. So in the model week, I could see like when you pointed out in the model week how you are spending your hours, and when Kunal said that searching for a full-time job is a full-time job in itself, that made sense. That if you cannot commit for an 8 hour a day work on your job applications, how are you mentally prepared to work 8 hour a day when you get the job? So, and at the same time, I could see like I am not spending that much time. And if I have that clarity that I should approach this part of my life in such a way, then I will be able to like classify things in my personal life, say no to things that are not necessary, and maybe move them according to my time classifications. That okay, this part of the day I have allotted to something, and I cannot like uh, compromise with that. So that will make things easier for me. At the same time, it will be easier to work on the things that I need to. So thank you for that.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Anand. And then Ramalikun.
Yeah. Thank you, Luki and Kunal, for this thought-provoking session. Before now, I just do things as I'm able to create the time. But I think one takeaway for me now is that time schedule. I'm thinking if I have something like that, probably I'm able to work better with my time. I'm able to achieve a lot of things. So the takeaway for me now is trying to create that time schedule and see how I can work. Maybe it's something that can actually improve the way I manage my time. And I need to do more practice. Practice, practice, practice. Really, that's my takeaway from this session.
100%. So the interview is all about practice and everything else. So
hey man, where's my reflection?
Go Kunal. Absolutely. Go
Cut
ahead.
the other. my reflection, guys, is the value of reflection. And being honest about where your strengths are, where your opportunities to do something different, to practice, to get better are at. And we all have them. Okay. And I've heard some honest reflections from each of you. I appreciate you guys coming on camera and sharing that. Be honest with yourselves, right? About how much effort, where your opportunities are. Ask for help in those areas. People will help. We're examples of this, right? But it starts with an honest reflection. It starts with an honest plan. It starts by putting these pieces together in action in that plan. And we'll keep going. But that is my reflection. Honest reflection, not just with your search, but as you get into the job in any aspect of your life, is so critical.
And sometimes you need external help, because if you're just in your head, then there's so many blind spots that you're missing. And there's the Scotiabank slogan, "You're richer than you think." And most of you are not giving yourself enough credit for all the amazing things you've done, and being able to put down paper or answer it in an interview question or in networking. Like there's a lot more. We talk about being unique, and you're like, I'm not unique. It's like, yes, you are. Absolutely, you are. You just have to come into grips with that. So we're going to be continuing on the series. So Anand, if you thought this was detailed, well, wait till you get to the next ones. We're going to dive deep into each and every one of them. LinkedIn, networking. So we'll kind of put those together. Interviews as well. We'll go deep dive into that, and then resumes there as well. And maybe as I was hearing some of the comments, there might be a 5th session on like mindset and procrastination, dealing with that. So that might be after we get through all the stuff of what you need to do, then maybe the procrastination parts of it as well. And I encourage all of you to keep a lookout for these sessions. And then if you want more, hopefully you're all on Getting Ahead, right? And I run the Career Confidence Gym, right, where we basically take all this and then practice and put it into practice and tell me about yourself again and again and again. And then well, if you need to reach out to someone, this is how you do it, and how you improve and get better. This is how we brainstorm for value and all that sort of stuff. So that's an offer that we make and is available, but I'll leave that and ask, like, what questions do folks have? Are folks curious or interested about anything? What questions you have?
I would suggest, folks, if you're open to attending the sessions, please just block the times now. Prakar, I'll keep you on the line for a couple minutes, buddy. Let's talk about getting the sessions posted and the invites out. But folks, block the time. You'll get emails from me. You'll see the posts on our LinkedIn page as well. If you're not following that, please do. Again, you can find the link at the bottom of the Getting Ahead homepage. And we look forward to seeing you guys in a couple of weeks. Continue to hope that this stuff is valuable and gives you some guidance and direction. And we'll see you soon.
Yeah. And I didn't update this time. It should be 6:30. So just like today.
We'll start at 6:30.
6:30.
Yeah, it'll be 6:30. Yeah, these things, small audiences, they're going to get more interactive. Need about an hour and a half to do them properly. So yeah, 6:30 would be great. We'll see you folks next week.